A lot of people are afraid of flying, and fear is a helpful emotion a lot of the time. In moderation, our fear protects us from dangers and motivates us to take helpful actions to try and avoid those dangers. But it's really important to acknowledge that our fear is based on perception of danger, not actual danger. And so often we can be afraid of things that aren't actually dangerous. And flying has some dangers, sure, as pretty much everything does. But it's not really dangerous. Flying is actually the safest form of transportation. There are very, very few accidents that happen with flying. But when there is an accident, you tend to hear about it. It tends to be pretty public. And so we have a skewed perspective of flying because we hear about accidents, we hear about problems, but actually we don't hear about all of the successes. Day after day after day. Flying is a very popular form of transportation, and the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of flights make it there safely with no incident at all. You only hear about the dangerous ones, and those are actually really, really few and far in between. They just tend to get a lot of publicity. People are flying all around the globe, again and again and again, day in and day out, millions of times. But we only hear about the bad ones. Most flights are completely safe, and there's no problem at all. And even when there is a problem, it tends to go okay, because there are lots of fail-safes, lots of systems in place to take care of these kinds of problems. We have been flying for decades, and we've refined it pretty well. We've identified problems and then figured out ways to fix those problems. Very, very clever people have worked long and hard to make sure that flight is actually really safe. We tend to see flights in the media as sensationalist things where a lot of danger takes place. It's a good setting for stories and action scenes and thrillers and things like that. So that tends to skew our perspective as well. And so we may develop a very negative view of flying. Stories often play into these fears, and so we just grow up with these kinds of worries that a wing might fall off, one of the engines might stop, that turbulence might make the plane crash or lose control. Maybe the plane's just going to fall out of the sky. But those things don't actually happen. There are lots and lots of really wonderful scientific concepts, some of which I'll explain in very basic detail, that make a plane keep flying. It's truly incredible that we are able to fly. And yet, so often, our experience becomes mundane, and we focus on the inconveniences of it, the food, the fact that we have to turn off our electrical devices sometimes, the cramped seating and things like that. But it's actually really amazing that we're able to fly. I'm going to explain how flying works and some of the systems that help us stay safe in a little bit. But first, I just want to go over a couple of basic tips to help you in your flight so that it's a bit more comfortable and you feel a bit more secure with it. First up, I'd really recommend trying to avoid any kind of media that involves plane crashes or dangers on planes. Seems like a no-brainer, but it's probably good not to watch any movies that involve planes for a little while. Also, familiarize yourself with the plane. Get to know what the plane looks like, inside and out. Get a sense of where the safety features are, and if you feel able, get to know the crew. You can request to meet the pilot or just have a chat with a flight attendant, but getting to know them a little bit and seeing, oh yeah, they seem to know what they're doing, can really help you feel more secure and more confident that, yeah, actually, they've got this. They're trained professionals who have gone through a lot of training and have a lot of experience at doing this. They do it day after day. They're really good at it. That can help a lot. I'd also recommend choosing an aisle seat if possible. That way you'll have a bit more room and you can get up and move around if you need to, and you won't have to look out the window unless you want to. You can also have a chat with the people sitting next to you and just let them know, I'm a little bit anxious about flying, and that's okay. It's a very, very common thing, and they'll probably be able to reassure you, or at least, they'll be aware of it. And if they see that you're feeling a bit anxious, they might be able to help. People tend to be pretty nice. The crew is in charge of your safety, but remember that you were in charge of making the decision to go on this flight. It was your decision to take this flight, and it's your decision about how you respond to the experience and how you think about it. Yes, you can anticipate all of the potential things that can go wrong, but you can also say, you know what? I'm going to try and keep an open mind and think positively and focus on some of these tips to make things better, more safe, more secure, more enjoyable. I would also recommend having lots of audios and calming music on hand, preferably saved to your phone so that you can listen to them, even when you're in airplane mode. It's good to have that on hand, just in case. Have some entertainment and distractions so that you can keep yourself busy when you're flying. And remember to breathe. Breathing is really, really important. While you're flying, you may notice that you start to panic. You might experience some discomfort or some distress. It might be during turbulence, it might just be at any point in the flight. And it's important for you to understand what's actually happening there on a physiological level, on a biological level. If you feel turbulence or you notice something that causes you to feel distressed, your brain will interpret that as a danger, and it sends out a signal to pump up fight or flight, and it releases chemicals that make you physiologically aroused, stressed. You become excitable, you become energetic, you want to react to things. When that happens, you have two options. If you believe that there really is a danger and that you have to do something to fight against it, then you encourage your brain to keep pumping out more of those chemicals and you get more and more panicked. You can't stop that panic by telling yourself to stop panicking. It doesn't work like that. That part of your brain doesn't respond to language. It only understands behavior. So, your second option is to change your behavior. The only way to stop the panic is to act in a way that tells your brain that there is no danger. So, if you want to stop the panic, here's how you do it. Instead of taking fast, shallow breaths, take long, slow, deep breaths. In and out. Breathing is the language that your body and your brain understands best. This helps us to realize, oh, we're not in danger, and I can start to calm down. Instead of looking around in a frenzy, close your eyes. Instead of clenching the arms of your seat or gripping something tightly, let go. Loosen your grip. Relax all your muscles. One by one, scan from the top of your head down to your toes, and just relax each muscle. Calmly sink down into your seat with your eyes closed, breathing slowly and deeply. That behavior tells your brain that you're not in danger, and so it will shut down the fight or flight response and those chemicals that it releases. You'll start to feel calmer. Whenever you experience turbulence or anything else distressing, just accept it and tell yourself it's okay. This is distress more than danger. I might not like this, but I'm not in danger, and I don't have to do anything. I can let go. The pilots have got this, and everything is under control. To be honest, in the air, the plane pretty much flies itself anyway. Even if there's a problem, the plane can handle it. It's built to do that. Just take slow, deep breaths, close your eyes, relax your muscles, and then let the plane do its job. You'll be okay. During the flight, you might hear some noises, and if you don't know what they are, you might find that disturbing or distressing. But they are normal noises. Just after takeoff, you may hear the landing gear retract, so it causes a thumping sound. Perfectly normal. A landing gear isn't needed up in the air, so they retract it back, and it just sort of clicks into place. Totally normal. You might also hear a whirring sound when a motor retracts the flaps and the spoilers of the plane. These stick out of the back of the wings in order to add some extra lift on takeoff and also to help the plane slow down on descent. So, if you hear any whirrings or clicks, totally normal. You might also hear the engines throttle back when you're leveling off for cruise. Once you've reached the altitude that the pilots need to go to, the engines might kind of settle down. Totally normal as well. Most of the plane's journey is actually more about gliding, so you don't really need the engines to be that powerful once you're actually up in the air at a good height. When you're coming in for a landing, you might hear some more whirring sounds as the flaps and spoilers get extended again. And right before landing, of course, the landing gear is going to come down, and then it's going to make contact with the ground. So you might hear another thump and some noise when that happens too, and that's perfectly normal as well. It's all okay, but if you don't understand what the source of the noise is, it could be scary. So, now you know, and hopefully it won't be scary. And if you ever have any concerns, you can just ask a flight attendant. I mean, you look at them and they're not freaking out about a noise, it's probably fine. But if you're unsure or you're curious, you can ask. I said before that an airplane tends to glide. It's not really pushed by the engine so much. That helps it get up to a good height, a good altitude, so that it can glide through the air. But it doesn't really need the engines after that. And so you may have some catastrophizing going on in your brain saying, well, what if the engine falls off or it blows up or something? That's actually okay. Pilots are trained again and again and again to fly an airplane with any number of engines, including all of them, not working. So, if something does happen to the engines, you'll actually be fine. The plane can keep gliding and can make a safe landing. It might not be exactly where you want to land, but even without the engines, even if all of them are gone, the plane will actually be fine. Most of the work is done by the wings and by the air. See, the air is actually how the plane flies. It uses its wings to push down on the air, and that generates what's called lift. You push down on the air, and it pushes the plane up. The airplane builds up speed on the runway, and then once it's ready to take off, the wings are going fast enough and pushing enough air down hard enough to overcome the airplane's weight, and so it starts to take off. And so once it's in the air, it just kind of keeps going. It just glides and glides and glides. Once a plane's up in the air and it's good and high, it's cruising, it can actually trade in its altitude for airspeed. So even if you were to lose all of the engines, you could trade the height that you have for speed so that you could go forward enough and slowly descend back towards the ground. This is how gliders work, and airplanes are basically just big gliders, but with engines as well. If there is a problem with the engines, if, say, they catch fire, there are actually built-in fire extinguishers as well to put out the fires, so that everything should be fine. But pilots are trained specifically, again and again and again, to fly the airplane with any number of engines missing. They can handle it. It might be a little scary getting back on the ground after an emergency, but you'll survive. Planes are actually very safe, and they are built very strong and very tough. According to all the regulatory bodies on Earth in whatever country you're in, all aircraft are designed and built to withstand far more stress that occurs in normal flight. They're built way stronger than they actually need to be just to make it safe. They're tough enough to withstand turbulence, easy peasy. So what is turbulence? You may not have really thought about this, but an airplane moves through air that itself is actually moving. And when air is moving, it flows in ways pretty similar to moving water. Only we can't see the air currents like we can the swirls and ripples of water. So you can imagine it a bit like the currents of the ocean or a stream or something like that. Air currents can vary. And so if you move rapidly from one current to another current that might be moving in different directions or have different temperature or speeds, then you might experience a feeling of turbulence. You're crossing a barrier between different air currents, and so it can be a little bumpy, but it's actually fine. There's a couple of different causes of turbulence. The first one is convective currents. So the sun heats the ground, and then that heat causes the air to rise, and as the hot air rises, it cools and forms clouds, like me. And so, typically, planes want to try and avoid clouds where possible, because it can kind of cause a little bit of a jump. It's not dangerous, it just might be a little uncomfortable, so they try and avoid clouds if they can, and usually they fly above the clouds. Buildings, mountains, other things like that can also obstruct wind flow, and so that can cause kind of like diversions of water, a bit like if there was a natural dam in a lake or a river or something, it causes the water to flow around it, right? And the same thing is kind of true of air. So those kind of obstacles can cause potential turbulence as well. But the most common one is called wind shear. See, there are these streams of air called jet streams, and they're kind of like railroads, but for airplanes. They are fast-moving currents of air. You can actually kind of hitch a ride on them, a little bit like that scene with the turtle in Finding Nemo. And they can get you places much, much faster. But if you're kind of at the boundary between winds, if you're coming out of or going into a jet stream, or at the boundary between jet streams, then you might experience some turbulence there too. But even if you do experience some turbulence, it's generally not dangerous. Very occasionally, in an extreme thunderstorm, turbulence could be dangerous. But airplanes have radars that help them figure out where those thunderstorms are and how to avoid them, and typically their flight plan is already mapped out well ahead of schedule by meteorologists and air traffic controllers who know where these storms are going to be, and they direct you around them. No competent pilot is going to fly into a thunderstorm, so you don't need to worry about that. The only real danger that you need to be aware of is that if the plane experiences some turbulence, it might bump you around a bit. And that's why, if you're going to experience some turbulence, the pilots will put on that little light that says, fasten seatbelts. And it's a good idea to follow that instruction, because if the plane is bumping around, then you might get bumped around too. And if you're not securely fastened in place, you might hit your head or fall out of your chair or something. You might get thrown around a little bit. So it's important to pay attention when that sign comes on. They'll announce it, they'll let you know, and you'll see other people doing it too. It's probably a good idea, though, to always have your seatbelt fastened, at least kind of loosely, whenever you're sitting on the chair. Obviously, if you need to get up and go to the bathroom or something, you can unfasten your seatbelt. But when you come back to your chair, just have it loosely fastened so that it's always kind of there to hold you in place just in case there's any unexpected turbulence. It doesn't have to be tight. You don't need to worry. You don't need to be paranoid about it. It's just good practice to have. Keeps you safe, helps you feel secure. The only other aspect of turbulence that you really need to be aware of is that sometimes there might be some turbulence when you're trying to land. That's okay. It's usually not a problem unless there's like a thunderstorm at the airport. But if that's the case, then usually planes get rerouted so they can go to another airport that is safer. And that's fine. Most landings, though, they happen perfectly fine. They're absolutely smooth, thousands of times a day, all fine. But sometimes a landing might not go exactly as planned. You may have what's called a missed approach. The pilots may start going in for a landing and then abort the landing. They may reject it. And this is not a problem. It's just that right from the beginning, pilots are trained, even when they're in this tiny little two-seater aeroplane when they're training, they are trained not to take anything for granted. Before taking off, they review emergency procedures for things that could go wrong during the takeoff, and when they start the final descent, they have to review all sorts of procedures for navigating and all that kind of stuff too. And on final approach for landing, every pilot is highly alert and prepared to abort the landing and fly around for another try if anything doesn't appear normal. They can reject a landing for any reason. It might be that there's a flock of birds in the area. There might be animals on the runway. The winds could be a little strong. Another aircraft might have accidentally taxied onto the runway. The alignment might be a little bit off. Maybe some clouds were there. The winds might have changed. Anything like that. And the pilot might go, you know what? Let's take it again. They're a bit of a perfectionist about this, but it's for a good reason, to keep you safe. Just because they reject a landing doesn't mean that there's any danger or any problems. They just want to make sure that it's okay. So they'll have a missed approach and they'll go around again. They'll go back to a predetermined spot on their navigation chart, and then they will try again to land. And hopefully the conditions have changed and they land properly and everything is fine. But if not, you might get diverted to another airport. And that doesn't happen often, but if it does happen, it's usually a good thing because the pilot really wants to make sure that everything's fine and that you're safe and sound. They're looking out for you. So, just because you might have a missed approach or they might go around for another landing, not a problem. Doesn't mean that anything's wrong. Doesn't mean that you're going to crash. Just means they're going to play it safe. Thousands of flights are successful day after day all over the world. People do this on a daily basis. I mean, the pilots and the flight attendants are doing this as their job again and again and again and again. They wouldn't keep doing it if it was super, super dangerous. It's absolutely fine. and you're going to be okay. Just remember that if you start to panic, breathe, close your eyes, relax your muscles, and just slow down. The pilots have got this. This is their job. They have trained for hundreds of hours before they even got to fly a proper big plane. Not only that, they have hundreds of hours of experience. They know what they're doing. There's a whole team of people coordinating, looking ahead, seeing if there's any problems, giving advice and guidance. It's all going to be okay. If you have any questions or concerns, talk to your flight attendants. Ask for some reassurance. Things will be okay. Just take care of yourself. Avoid caffeine. Don't watch anything that's going to freak you out. Have some nice, calming, relaxing, entertaining things to keep yourself busy and help you soothe yourself if you do run into a little turbulence or you start to panic. Everything's going to be fine. I've flown on planes plenty of times, and I've had great experiences. You don't need to worry. It's all going to be okay. You'll get there safe and sound. I promise. I'm a rain cloud. I'll take care of you. You can give me a little wave out the window as you fly past. I'll look out for you.